who represents a slightly different kind of music, at least in our memory. And we're going live by satellite to London at 17 before 9. The man I'm talking about is George Harrison. He is a man of so many talents, a former Beatle, as you all know. He's a fine musician, composer, writer, and in recent years he has also become a movie producer of some note. He also lives a rather private life now. He rarely grants interviews, and this morning we're delighted to have George Harrison with us from London Live. George, it's a pleasure meeting you, and it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Could you hear any of that music, that
Yeah.
picking you just heard? How did it sound?
I did. Yeah, Blue Ridge Mountains. It sounded like you were interviewing pigs. Is that right?
You're close.
Something about pigs.
You got it. George, let's
Yeah.
talk about the movie Time Bandits, which I had the pleasure of seeing yesterday. It hasn't been released yet, as you know. It's going to be released very soon in the States. You wrote the score. You also produced it. How would you describe it, briefly? How would you describe the movie? Because it is unusual.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's quite unusual. I think it's a sort of good film for children mainly, but it's also quite good for adults. It's a bit crazy, you know, being a spin-off of the Monty Python group. That is, it was written by Michael Palin and Terry Gilliam. It has Michael Palin and John Cleese in it. So it has a little bit of, you know, the usual sort of Monty Python sort of stuff, but at the same time, it's quite a thriller, you know, the way it looks. The film is really well shot. It's Terry Gilliam is the director. He's the American one in Monty Python. And he's the one who normally does the animation. So he's done the special effects and directed the film.
George, let me interrupt you. What I might do is we might show our viewers here a little bit of the movie so they'll have an idea what you're talking about.
That's a good idea.
What we're about to see are the traveling bandits. Now, these are bandits. They go from one place in time to another by sort of dropping through these holes in space, right?
Yeah, well, if I would just tell the audience briefly, the idea is that the Supreme Being, when he was making creation, well, everything that got done late on a Friday afternoon, you know, had a few holes in it. So he had these little people working down in the small shrubs department, and they were patching up the holes in everything. And they ran away with the map that shows all the holes in the space and time, and they're trying to escape from the Supreme Being, but at the same time, Evil, who's always not far behind, is trying to catch them because he'd like the map for his own use. So take it away.
All right, good description. Now let's look. The little people, and what they have done is busted into a little boy's bedroom, and now they're trying to find a way out. They need to get their way out and get back into space. Watch this from Time Bandits, produced by George Harrison. Watch. Now, they didn't, George, we just saw them as you weren't able to see it, but just as they came, they went into space, people should know that they land in Napoleon's time.
That's
Napoleon's
true,
time. Right?
Yeah, they just keep going, you know, from one thing into the next. It's quite a good idea, actually. Wish I'd thought of it.
Yeah, but you're involved. You've made it happen. We're going to break for a commercial, George, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Okay.
Back in a second. It's 12 minutes before 9. We'll be back with more of George Harrison in just a moment after these words from Style Shampoo.
I'm shouting all about love. Well, they treated you like a dog. Shouting all about love. Well, they treated you like a dog.
10 minutes before 9 right now. We're back with George Harrison live from London. The music you just heard is from his newest album. It's called Somewhere in England. Hi, George. Again, we're back on live right now. You've been involved with the Monty Python, the group, the gang, for quite some time now. You said one time that you got involved after the Beatles because it helped you to kind of bridge the years when there wasn't much happening. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, in the late 60s, when Monty Python first came on television in the UK, well, there was, you know, what the Beatles were representing or were trying to, you know, we were trying to be something new. We're trying to, you know, give some alternatives, and likewise in the comedy situation, everything was pretty boring, I thought. It was pretty much the same for years and years, and then Python came along with this totally off-the-wall type of humor, and you know, they were sort of laughing about most of the things which should be laughed about, I think. You know, the government and just the way we all are. I mean, the usual things. And they didn't really leave much unturned, many stones unturned, really, in their humour. And it just filled in that period, you know, between, like, going into the 70s. It got a bit depressing, I think, after the 60s. And it's good to have a laugh, you know. It's good if there is something to keep you smiling.
George, I would imagine there's, at least I sense, that there's always been kind of a pressure on you and Paul and Ringo to keep producing, to keep turning things out, and particularly perhaps you and Paul. How has that pressure affected you over the last, say, 10 years?
Well, I don't think there's that much pressure to produce. I think you're talking about records or music. There's not too much pressure in order to do that, but at the same time, it's what we do, it's what we have done in the past, and you know, everybody needs to make a living or do something just to keep themselves busy, and so might as well continue doing the thing that we learned. You know, we sort of did our apprenticeship. The thing that's, I think the pressure is coming now from the other way, because the record business as a whole, it's, you know, everybody's in the record business, everybody and their grannies, you know, they're all songwriters. Everybody has million-dollar record deals, to the point where the record business is so saturated that a sort of rot set in, actually, with the radio, and nobody knows what people want, or some people think they know what the public want, so it's got this great confusion. So I think the most difficult thing is just to try and continue and try to do what comes natural, and hope that somehow it still fits into the picture.
Mm-hmm. George, you wrote a beautiful song after John Lennon died all those years ago, and one of the couplets in it, you wrote, "Living with good and bad, I always looked up to you," unquote. How did he influence, John influence you, and how did you influence him, do you think, through the years?
Well, it would be pretty hard to say just in a minute or so, but you know, we grew up together. We from the age of about, maybe I was about 13 when I first met him. He was a tough guy, you know, he wanted to do something different, and likewise so did I and Paul. And so we gained strength from each other, really, like that. He was always the noisy one, or the, you know, the cheeky one, the pushy one. He'd be a bit more outspoken than the others. And at the same time, I think that was important. You know, we had all those elements, John being, you know, a bit upmarket with the intellectuals, and Paul being cute, and, you know, Ringo being cuddly, and I was the quiet one. So, I mean, it all sort of worked out. But, you know, it would be difficult to say. Hello? What was that? Beep, beep.
I don't know. You're okay, I think.
Something beeping in my headphone. But it would be hard to say just in a minute, you know, because we grew up together. We spent many, many years together, and
but a lot of love and respect.
Yeah.
Both.
So, I mean, the song really, it helps having music. Hello, somebody's on the telephone here in my ear.
Whoever's in George's ear, get out of George's ear. All right, right now, George Harrison, one of the great superstars of all time, the former Beatle. He's also a movie producer, and here is a look at a piece of time, Bandits, George Harrison's new movie. Watch. Unusual movie with an unusual cast. I had the pleasure of talking with George Harrison at some length last week about not only his movie, but life with the Beatles. Here's our conversation with George Harrison. George, you live what appears to be quite a private life. How much of that is a reaction to the absolute opposite of what your life was years ago during the Beatles? It was so intense and it was so public. How much of this is a reaction to that?
I think it's more or less total reaction, really, because that time, you know, over a period of probably 6 or 7 years, at least, we didn't seem to have a moment, you know, when we weren't being photographed or interviewed, or even outside the houses we lived, you know, there was always people, press. And it was so intense, you know, that it was a concentrated sort of type of exposure. And I think that I really overdosed on the fame of the Beatles, you know. I mean, that was enough for me, you know, actually.
Yeah.
If it was a good experience to have, but at the same time, you know, it's not the be-all and end-all of life to be somebody famous. And, you know, I prefer some quiet, simple things.
You said one time I read, you described those years as 4 sane people in the midst of madness. Were you?
That's true.
Were you ever frightened by it? Was it ever frightening, or?
It was terrifying at times. I mean, we were all pretty naive. Unfortunately, it was at a time before, you know, before all the hijackings and that sort of terrorism and stuff that's gone on now. But we used to be, the 4 of us, just with 2 roadies, you know, 2 road managers, one with the equipment, one with the suits, and that was it. I mean, nowadays people go on the road with
Yeah.
security, truckloads
Right.
of equipment and all this sort of stuff. So,
was it fun though? The impression was that it was 4 guys, young guys having a great time, having a ball, because you just created this fabulous impression of having a good time and everything. How wrong was that?
well, that was quite right to begin with. I mean, it was absolutely right. By the time we first came to America, it was, I mean, it was just a novelty, you know, just to be natural and cute and that everybody seemed to like us, you know. It was easy. All we did was just be 4 cheeky lads and they loved it. And at that time, it was fun, you know, traveling, everybody giving us attention and the records all selling, and it was wonderful. But then it just became too much.
People couldn't
Like
really
too much.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just too much of anything, really. You know, you overdose on it.
A lot of people, I mean, millions of people have tried for years and did try for years for you guys to get back together again, and yet you didn't, obviously. And people couldn't understand why you wouldn't get together again. Can you explain why they didn't understand?
Well, you know, the simplest way of saying is like when you grow up in a family and everybody grows up and they all leave home and the brothers and sisters all go and get married and lead their own lives, you know, and it's like really asking them to all go back and live with their mum and dad again. So, you know, that's the simplest thing. You know, for us as individuals, we all had our own lives to lead, and, you know, we have a lot of experiences other than being 4 people stuck in the same hotel room together that we had to live out.
After the Beatles, you went through a period, I understand, in the early 70s up into 74. It was a rugged, tough period for you. What was that period like, and how did you get yourself out of it? What did you do to pull yourself up and get yourself back on a, you know, more productive road?
You mean in the 70s?
Yeah.
Well, the 70s, for me, sort of started out as really the continuation of the 60s. I mean, although the Beatles was split in about 69, for me, it was important to, you know, all these songs that I'd been writing, to record them and to make solo albums. The music business sort of was going through a lot of changes, and I decided to become a gardener, actually.
You really love it, don't you? The gardening, yeah.
I do, yeah, I like the garden. It's sort of, well, you know, like Chauncey Gardner in the film, Peter Sellers,
Yeah.
being there. It's true, you know, in the garden, you see all the seasons come and go, and whatever you do can affect it all, but at the same time, the flowers don't answer you back. Don't give you no trouble. It's very nice.
Do you miss any of that? Do you miss any of the old days, or?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. You know, I mean, they're all there in memory, but, you know, don't look back. I think past is gone, now canst not that recall, and future is not, may not be at all, but present is, you see. That's the only thing that exists, is the present, and it's, there's enough happening right now for me to, you know, to be enjoying myself.
Have you lost your taste for performing publicly? Paul does it, but you don't. Is that?
Well, I can understand the thrill it is to be in a band, you know. There's nothing greater than to be out there in a band when everything's happening and it's, you know, the band's going together and it sounds good. But like you were mentioning about the pressure since the Beatles split is you know, each person is expecting to see, you know, they want to see the Beatles. They don't really want to see Paul McCartney or George Harrison. They want to relive this dream about the Beatles. So that, you know, that puts a pressure on him. At the same time, those tours, you tend to be playing to a lot of people who are just out, you know, because it's what's happening in town. And so you get a lot of drunks and, you know, I don't know, I never enjoyed the last tour from that point of view.
Mm-hmm. Because it just wasn't music.
Yeah,
people.
you know, half the people didn't even know it was on the stage. You know, they're all out of their skulls.
Mm. So you're going to leave that behind. You don't need any more of that.
Well, you know, I don't like, you know, for instance, you know, I can be doing other nice things and relaxing instead of being in some sort of terrible motel in
somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere I don't want to be. I think my ego was fulfilled with that, you know, appearance. But at the same time, you know, I may do a show sometime, from time to time.
Right.
I like this sort of satellite idea.
That's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's much better. You
Pretty
just sit
clever.
at home and... Yeah.
Exactly. It's possible, and you know this as well as everybody does, it's possible that all of you will be best known not for your individual work, but because you were Beatles. Does that trouble you at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because, you know, who are we anyway? You know, I mean, even if they knew me as me, George Harrison, they don't really know me. It doesn't matter what they remember you for. It's really what you attain that's, you know, for your own personal self that counts.
What are you looking forward to now, George? What's got you excited at the moment? What are you looking forward to doing next? You've got Bandits coming out as a big movie, and you've got albums out. What's next?
I'm not too sure. There's a couple of movies that we may get involved with in England. See, I'm partners in a company, Handmade Films, which is the company that originally did the Python's Life of Brian. And it seems at this time in England that the film industry is not sort of doing very well. And so, you know, that's quite nice. We're able to back some people with some different ideas, or people who want to make films. Not everybody, but, you know, we can do 1 or 2 a year. And hopefully, if we can at least break even on that, we can continue to do that. So in a way, that's quite nice. It supports some sort of artistic talent, and it gives the actors a job. The film industry, you know, it helps it to tick over.
Keeps it going. George, it's really nice. It's really nice meeting you, and it's awfully long distance, but it's nice meeting you like this. I hope we meet in person one day soon. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll be right back after this.